At this point, let's get the insights from Dr. Rommel Banlaoi, President of the Society for International Security Studies. Good morning.
Yes, God. Good morning to both of you. Good morning to everyone.
Yes, Doc, thank you for joining us this
Angelo
morning.
and
Yeah.
yes.
All right, let's start off with the first point. How realistic do you think is the proposal, or how effective will it be to replace the new ambassador who just came in?
Well, it will not contribute to the improvement of the current situation because if because the substantive issues have not been resolved. The key question here is not the representation of the ambassador, but the need for the two countries to rebuild confidence in order to find ways on how they can calm the situation in the South China Sea. There is a reason why the current ambassador was sent to the Philippines because they want to advance their national interest, and we also have the same reason to advance our national interest when it comes to the issue of the South China Sea. But I think the most important step now is for the two countries to rebuild confidence, in order to find ways on how they can manage their differences in the South China Sea.
Yeah, Doc, sabi ng, just to
Go ahead,
touch up on that, sabi ng ibang lawmakers, while you are right, no, and I agree with you, na we have to find a common ground, no, para these things can be resolved peacefully. But sabi nila, how could that be achieved when you come in swinging in a home that you were invited to and talking against the owners of that home? Parang you don't see that daw. Philippine an envoy in China wouldn't do that, or an envoy or ambassador in the US wouldn't do that in the US. Parang wala daw respect or galang man lang before he says these things.
Well, exactly, that's the thing that we need to assert. We need to assert mutual respect, And I have met the Chinese ambassador, and I can see in him the good intention to repair damaged political ties between the Philippines and China. And in fact, he is very much willing to open all channels of communication for the two parties to really talk. Okay? And I don't think a change of the ambassador will make a difference. You're only touching the surface. What we need is to address the fundamental issue that results in the deterioration of bilateral ties. And for me, the issue here is the lack of trust, the lack of mutual respect. And I think we can regain mutual trust and we can promote mutual respect by first conducting a confidence-building measure. What we need that is a confidence-building measure.
All right. But what can you say about the recent resolution passed by the Senate? No, yung nilalaman doon is yung kanilang kumbaga yung hindi nila pagsang-ayon,
Condemnation.
'di ba, doon sa mga actions in China against the government officials.
Well, that's okay for me. Because we are articulating our national position, we're articulating our national sentiment, and we have to make that known to not only to the Chinese ambassador but also to the Chinese government that we have this kind of position. But having said that, what's the next move on the part of both parties? It takes two to tango. Without an arrangement by the two parties to de-escalate their current situation, then we will face the same cycle again. So I have no problem with the Senate resolution, but I think because it's just an articulation of our national position. But what we need to examine is whether this Senate resolution can really make a difference. And apparently, it did. Yeah, because now, if you will listen to the various statements of the Chinese ambassador, especially his speech during the celebration of the Chinese New Year, he said he's willing to talk to the Philippine government, and he's willing to cooperate, and he's willing to address our differences, and he's willing to meet halfway, and he is willing to manage our differences. But of course, the taste of the pudding is in the eating. So we need to see whether he's truthful to what he's saying. So we need to he needs to match what he's saying with his action. And what we need now is to really make a sincere move on the part of both parties to really talk. And I see positive signs because both parties are already making talks. You know, they already resumed the bilateral consultative mechanism in the South China Sea. They started talking about that in Cebu, and there's also another mechanism where the two parties can discuss their differences, the current negotiation of the Code of Conduct in the South China Sea. So I see positive signs.
Right.
So what we need now is to stop this exchange of harsh words against each other, because you're only hurting each other's national sensitivities. So stop this word war and start word peace.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But having said that, no, recently or yesterday, nagsabi rin itong Chinese ambassador to the Philippines, and I quote, no, let's sit down, let's talk. No, he said, my own reflections is that in recent times, we have not been meeting each other enough. Political dialogue has at times nearly come to a standstill. What do you have to say to that? Di ba parang lagi naman we were always extending our hand to talk to them?
Yes, talking is essential, and I think on the part of the Chinese embassy, they feel that the talking is not enough. So we need to accelerate talking. And for me, let us not be impatient about talking. Let us extend our patience when it comes to talking to China, because China has deep experiences in talking with all nations. You know, in my research about China's territorial disputes with other neighbors, China spent a lot of years talking to their neighbors just to make peaceful settlement of disputes. Especially when it comes to Chinese territories. For example, China took more than 400 years to Portugal in order to get Macau, and more than 250 years in talking with the Great Britain in order to regain Hong Kong. So China has this experiences in talking, and the Philippines should also exercise our patience in talking. And I would like to cite the example of our talks with Indonesia. Do you know that we also have maritime jurisdictional conflict with Indonesia in the Sulu Sea? But we're able to settle our maritime jurisdictional conflicts with Indonesia after 20 years of talking. Just imagine, Indonesia is not a problematic country for the Philippines. Indonesia is a friendly country for the Philippines, but it took us 20 years of talking. So we have to prepare for a long talk in order to manage our differences.
But what's the best way to continue this dialogue with China without so much as continuing to affect our fishermen, of course, no? Kasi iba ang kaso. Kawawa naman ang mga fishermen natin. They bear the brunt of this conflict. So do you think Doc, may possibility na pwede tayo mag-sit down pero mag-pause muna tayo? Tigil muna natin yung hostilities?
That's right. In fact, we already had such kind of arrangement with China in 2019 when we entered into an agreement with China to pursue joint fishery management cooperation without surrendering our national positions and in respect of our own territorial claims. The both parties decided to establish a working group on joint fishery management cooperation in the West Philippine Sea, and we need to take stock of all the discussions on that aspect. And that was established during the bilateral consultative mechanism in the South China Sea. And not only that, both parties also decided to cooperate in the development of natural gas and oil. And they also decided to cooperate in the area of search and rescue cooperation. You know, during the time of the previous government of Duterte, there was a very strong Coast Guard to Coast Guard cooperation. And we need to revitalize that. We need to revive such kind of working arrangement between our two Coast Guards. And we also established working group on political and security cooperation in the South China Sea. So we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We already had initial achievements in the past where we can use to move forward. So for me, that's a priority. We need to revive discussion again on joint fishery management cooperation. And in fact, this year I'll be launching my book, and I devoted one chapter on that book on the need for joint fishery management, and also wrote another chapter on the development of natural gas and oil, and also chapters on migration issues and even media cooperation. So what we need are these things, you know. So we people from the academy, we already have a lot of proposals on how the two parties can really cooperate rather than compete in the South China Sea. Unfortunately, some of our politicians are not privy with this kind of discussions. That's why I'm talking with some senators, I'm talking with some congressmen and some officials of the government, presenting to them my research to enlighten them about the availability of research in order to guide public policies. But I lament the fact that there are some elected politicians with vested interests, with political agenda, just using this to cover some important issues that we need to face in our country. But when it comes to peaceful approaches to manage our differences with China, we from the academy, we already have a lot of proposals, and we are making these proposals known to our officials so that it can inform the formulation of our policy.
Okay, quick follow-up lang before I turn you over to Angela and Doc. I think there was some head ground, there were some gains in the past with regards to yung joint fishing management, no? Mukhang for a while both sides were okay doing it, pero ang naging problema daw dito is with regards to sino magpapaalam kay Nino. Kasi ang stand ng Philippines, kayo magpaalam sa amin. Ang stand ng China, no, kayo magpaalam sa amin. So both countries were not willing to budge on that issue because we were both standing up for our kung ano yung belief natin at that point. How do you move on with this fishing management issue and mechanisms and rules pwede ba itabi muna o paalam ko sa akin, paalam ako sa iyo? Can we remove that muna and say, okay, sabay-sabay na lang muna tayo mag-fishing, tsaka na tayo magpaalamanan, basta maayos ang usapan?
Well, the devil is in the details. So when it comes to that details, both parties need to talk more on how to establish arrangements on how to pursue with joint fishery management. The question here, kasi there's a definitional problem. In international law, when you want to do something in the disputed area, there's a concept of prior notification. So doon nagkakatalo, akala kasi from the perspective of the Philippines, magpapaalam tayo sa kanila. Pero it's just it's like a respect, prior notification that we are doing this kind of activities. So I think they can sort that out if they continue talking about the details on how they can implement that. You know, so yung mga differences na yon should not prevent the two parties to continue cooperating. Kasi problema, pag nagkaroon tayo ng minor issues just like that, we want to stop the process. No. While we are sorting out things, we should continue the cooperative activities. So, but of course, if China decides to stop us from our fishing activities, that's not appropriate. So we have to find ways where both fishermen, okay, with all fishermen in that area can enjoy their traditional fishing activities because even the international arbitration tribunal declared the South China Sea and West Philippine Sea, especially the waters around the Scarborough Shoal, is a traditional fishing ground of user states, not only Chinese and Filipinos, but other user states.
Well, siyempre, tayo on our part naman, just to be fair, we're just asserting our rights based on dun sa tribunal ruling, di ba? That it is within our exclusive economic zone. So, bakit kami magpapaalam? But what do you suggest we should do?
Kasi nga dito, Angela, the problem is China has big claims also. So yun nga, and there's a maritime jurisdictional conflict. Right? It's okay if there is no problem. Like for example, the exclusive economic zone in the Benham Rice. No one is challenging our position on that. So we don't need to ask everyone for our fishing activities in the 200 nautical miles exclusive economic zone in the Benham Rice facing the East Philippine Sea. But when it comes to the West Philippine Sea, there's a problem because it is challenged by other parties, not only China, but also Vietnam, Malaysia, to a certain extent Taiwan, and then Brunei, and going back even down south, the Natuna Island is in Indonesia. So, kasi there is a maritime jurisdictional problem. There is overlapping claims to exclusive economic zone, and we need to settle these overlapping claims to exclusive economic zone.
Well, what do you suggest we should do na kahit na po tayo ay nakikipag-usap naman, at the same time, continuous pa rin naman po yung harassment na nangyayari, especially sa mga fishermen natin doon sa area na yon?
That's why we need to discuss that in the bilateral consultative mechanism in the South China Sea for all parties to exercise self-restraint, okay, and implement the principle of United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea for all parties to fulfill their responsibility to cooperate. Remember, under UNCLOS, cooperation is not a moral suasion. Cooperation is a duty. Cooperation is a responsibility. And in order to pursue cooperation, UNCLOS also requires two parties to do two other things. One is to exercise self-restraint in the conduct of unilateral activities, and apparently all these China's actions against us are unilateral actions, and China also regards our actions in the West Philippine Sea as unilateral actions. We need to exercise self-restraint in the conduct of unilateral activities that are considered to be hostile by other parties. And at the same time, we have to pursue this concept of due regard, meaning we have to take into account that other parties also have their own national positions. Okay, like the Philippines, we also have our national position, so we need to pay due regard also. And according to UNCLOS, with the principle of self-restraint and due regard, then the two parties can fulfill their obligation to cooperate, and that is the thing that should guide not only the Philippines and China, but also other parties. In fact, it's working between China, it's working between the Philippines and Vietnam. Okay, we have arrangements with Vietnam already. It's also working with the Philippines and Malaysia. It's working. We have an arrangement with Malaysia, and not only in the South China Sea, but also in Sabah. So it's working. Now the question is, if it's working so far with Malaysia and Indonesia, why we cannot make it work with China? So that begs the question, because China is a big elephant in the room, big elephant in the room, and China's action in the South China Sea is not only perceived in the context of the South China Sea dispute, but also perceived in the context of U.S.-China major power rivalry, and that complicates the situation because the Philippines is an ally of the United States. So, maraming factors on why we are facing this kind of situation, why we find ourselves in this kind of difficult situation in the South China Sea.
Right, but lastly, Doc, ASEAN Summit is going to take place next year. Tayo po ang magiging host. Do you think there's going to be a meaningful role itong ASEAN Summit to de-escalate the tension between the Philippines and China?
Yeah, in fact, we are given the historic role in ASEAN because all parties involved in the discussion in the South China Sea, they decided to conclude the negotiations while the Philippines is a chair of the ASEAN. So they have a target they have a target to conclude the negotiation on the Code of Conduct in the South China Sea. And I'm happy to see that all parties in the negotiations already have achieved one common decision that if they conclude the Code of Conduct in the South China Sea, this code must be legally binding and substantive and in accordance with international law, particularly the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea. But there are other details that they still need to thresh out, and I hope under the Philippine chairmanship, all parties concerned, China and ASEAN, will be able to thresh out all these small differences, okay, in order to really conclude and come out with a code of conduct in the South China Sea. But I need to make this caveat, Angela and Angelo, a caveat. The Code of Conduct in the South China Sea has no pretension to settle territorial disputes. It has no pretension to settle maritime jurisdictional conflict. But the Code of Conduct in the South China Sea can enable the peaceful settlement in this dispute and peaceful settlement of maritime jurisdictional conflict by encouraging all parties to uphold a law that will promote a good order at sea. Kasi ang tingin ng iba kasi akala nila pag may Code of Conduct in the South China Sea na mapipeacefully resolve na yung territorial disputes. No. But it only wants to create a conducive environment for all parties to cooperate so that they can settle the disputes peacefully eventually.
But I remember former Justice Carpio said in one of his interviews na Code of Conduct COC is dead in the water already. For him.
We respect his opinion, but as we see in the current negotiations, there is a intention on the part of all parties concerned to really come out with a code of conduct. So there are several meetings for that, and as we speak now, there are working groups meeting in the area of the geographic scope, and in the area of activities to be covered by the Code of Conduct, and even identifying all areas where parties can really cooperate. And most importantly, they are also now discussing, there's another working group discussing the role of other user states on how they can comply with the Code of Conduct. So there are a lot of working groups meeting now in order to accelerate the conclusion of the Code of Conduct in the South China Sea. And I'm privy to these discussions because I'm closely monitoring the situation for the past 20 years.
Yeah. Ang tagal na niyan eh.
Tagal
Alright,
na ito.
sige
Pero
po.
I'm not losing my patience. I'm not losing my patience. But before we leave Angela and Angelo, I would like to take advantage of this situation to clarify yung issues ngayon na bumabagabag ngayon sa sinabi ni Senator Marcoleta na ibigay
I-give
ng
up ang
KIG. Kasi maraming inaccuracies kasi na dinidiscuss ngayon ng ating mga legislators when it comes to the issue of the Kalayaan Island Group. Remember, the Kalayaan Island Group is a group of islands with 54 land features.
Right.
Hindi lahat, 80% ng land features ng Kalayaan Island Group belong to our exclusive economic zone. And only 80% is outside of our exclusive economic zone. Kaya hindi mo pwedeng i-give up yan.
Right.
Pero nonetheless, ang issue dito sa Kalayaan Island Group is not only an issue of maritime rights. Per Presidential Decree 1596, signed in 1978, we declared all land features within the Kalayaan Island Group as an inherent part of our national territory. So we cannot, and we cannot give that up. And although Pag-asa Island, which is the bone of contention, is outside of our exclusive economic zone, we declared that as part of our territory, and we have already established our effective control, effective administration, and effective occupation of Pag-asa Island.
Ayun. Alright, but he said on his defense, he was taken out of context. Hindi naman daw yun na ibig niyang sabihin.
Yun nga,
Alright, sige po.
Buti naman nga na-clarify niya na he was taken out of context. Now, I'm providing the right context on the Kalayaan Island Group.
Right.
And ito pa nga, the Kalayaan Island Group, siguro sa mga discussions natin, let's discuss the details of that. It's really contested because Calayan
Sige
Island
po.
Group is also being challenged not only by China but also by Vietnam,
Right.
Malaysia, Brunei, and Taiwan.
Sige po, sa susunod po ninyo, kung may oras pa po kayo, pag-usapan po natin yan. But for the meantime, maraming salamat po sa inyong oras. As always, Dr. Rommel Banlaoi, President of the Society for International Security Studies. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Angela and Angelo.
Thank
God
you.
bless you both.